Hey y'all! Today I'm going to be going over and simplifying some of the most important presidential powers and constraints as they're outlined by the United States Constitution. So Article 2, Section 1, where we're going to start, is the basic outlining of the presidency. And it just states very simply that the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States of America. This seems very straightforward, right? But ultimately, this clause, as well as the majority of the Constitution, was very groundbreaking for its time. Here, with this sentence, the founders were able to create an official position for the first time in the world's history, which would both hold great executive power and be checked and limited by various independent functions and actors within that same system. Some controversies do arise here, as in other areas of the Constitution, by raising the question, how much power is encompassed by this clause? As we will find, there are various checks and balances in place to avoid utilitarian power anywhere within the presidency, though it is still heavily contested at times. This first section is also where you will find all the basic requirements in order to become president, like the age requirement. You must be 35 and you must be a U.S. citizen. And it also goes over all the basics of the methods of electing the president, which is the nitty-gritty that we won't get into today. All right, so we're going to move on to one of the first checks of the presidential power that we're going to be looking at. And the question that goes along with this is, how long can the president remain in office? And now, so we're fast forwarding from where we just were in the Constitution to Amendment 22, Section 1. And this states that no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. Again, seems super basic, but it's a great example of a check on the presidential power because it defines the number of terms that one person is allowed to serve as the president. And that helps to assure that no individual, party, or group can easily take advantage of the system in order to retain power for years on end. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Article 1, Section 7, and this kind of helps us look into the question of how is the president involved with legislation and bill passing. So we move backwards again in the Constitution just a bit, and we find one of these various checks on presidential power. And this section states, every bill which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate shall, before it become a law, be presented to the President of the United States. This clause goes on a little farther to give the president the power to return a bill along with any objections if he doesn't agree with the bill as it came to him. And so following that procedure, the legislation will then have the option to reevaluate that bill and pass it again with 2/3 majority vote a second time for enacting it. Alternatively, the president also has the option to pass the bill when it arrives to him the first time, or in a little more sticky political situation, the president also will have the option to keep the bill for 10 days and let it automatically pass into law without his executive approval. So this is a really good example, and the most important note of this section seems to be that the power of Congress, both the House and the Senate, to override that contested bill by obtaining a 2/3 majority vote by both houses a second time. But the president also does have that power to receive it the first time and say, here are the issues I have with it. Here, Congress, please reevaluate. So it's nice to see how Congress and the president will work together in this way, and there's checks and balances between the two. All right, and now we're moving on to Article 2, Section 4. This is all about impeachment processes. So in Article 2, Section 4, it states, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So this clause implicates that if an action by the president or any other official actually, but we're focusing on the president, is contested to be treasonous or of criminal status, there is actually legal recourse for concerned parties to remove the president after he or she has been convicted in a fair trial by Congress. So in addition, when talking about impeachment processes, there is also Article 1, Section 3, which looks at Congress' role in the impeachment process. And it states that impeachment can only occur with 2/3 majority of the Senate are present and in favor of impeachment. This section also goes on to state that the impeachment trial is solely for the end product of removing an official from their position in office, but after being convicted, then in an impeachment trial, then the individual will still be subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. So that basically, to sum up, just means the impeachment trial is solely for removing the person from office, and then afterwards, that individual can be tried criminally for whatever their transgression. All right, and now we're going to be looking at powers involving treaties, war, and military force. This gets brought up primarily in Article 2, Section 2, and the first clause in this section states that the President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the U.S., and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the U.S. Note now that that power is extended to other branches of the military that were founded after the drafting of the Constitution. But this clause specifically has caused a lot of controversy because some presidents over the years have asserted it to vest ultimate power in them to control any and all military activity. But there are intended boundaries outlined in other areas of the Constitution to contest this power imbalance. An interesting side note, which really helps relate this controversial topic to more present-day issues, is a law that was later drafted and passed, which may have actually extended this right to executive military action only during extreme circumstances or emergencies. And it is currently in contest again, as the question has arisen: can President Trump invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807, but more recently amended, to send troops domestically to end looting and riots in major cities? Section 252 of the Insurrection Act states that whenever the President considers that unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblages, or rebellion against the authority of the United States make it impracticable to enforce the laws of the United States in any state by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, he may call into federal service such of the militia of any state and use such of the armed forces as he considers necessary to enforce these laws or to suppress the rebellion. So this essentially reads and implies that if a situation is deemed out of control and it is understood that laws are not being executed and enforced in certain areas due to excessive violence or disturbance, that the president may have the right to act with military force. Does this apply to domestic controversy? Many additional and very controversial questions are raised with the specific power of the presidency. All right, now we're actually going to move back into the Constitution. We're still in Article 2, Section 2, and we're in the Advice and Consent Clause now, which states that he shall have power, the President shall have power, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. So basically what this is saying is that the President has the power to sign off on treaties, but he does require 2/3 of the Senate approval. So he's going to require that advice and consent of the Senate to make that action. And this check is also extended to the president's ability to appoint important people such as ambassadors, Supreme Court judges, and other highly ranked officials within the government. So before he does that, before somebody is actually put into that position, it is required that they are confirmed by Congress. Whereas the ability to appoint lower level officers and things like that are things that the president or department heads can do individually and independently, and there isn't a need for approval from Congress. But in the account of higher level officials, it is necessary to get that approval. So in spite of the controversial nature of this section, again raising the question of how much power the president is meant to wield, it is generally agreed that the president does obtain power to react or repel imminent acts on the country, but only Congress obtains the power to officially declare war on another nation. Congress is also the primary enactor of treaties, since the Senate is required to provide at least the 2/3 majority vote to enact a treaty, while the President alone is responsible for negotiating said treaties with foreign nations, hence the President's foreign policy power. This is just another great example of the checks and balances our Constitution tries to provide. However, it also displays the many openings for controversy and power wars among the branches of government. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope that now you have a little bit better understanding of how the Constitution relates to the presidency. Y'all have a good one.